Yeah.
He met it, he was working on 2 years ago.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Conscious Life Expo here in Los Angeles, California. And it's 2 p.m. That's the first time. Okay. We have lots for you today regarding extraterrestrial science, looking at disclosure, looking at defense policy, and certainly looking at the preeminent director of the New Paradigm Institute, Mr. Danny Sheehan. You can give him a big hand. Really the leading researcher when it comes to extraterrestrial science and certainly current event stories like the drone problem in New Jersey. But more importantly, the New Paradigm Institute, which he heads up, is wanting to have the military and have the Pentagon and other authorities disclose what's happening with us regarding the extraterrestrial issue. Spheres that drop into the ionosphere, the troposphere, the continuous visitations. We are being birthed into a slightly larger expression. It will startle the millions as we become into this new paradigm of having another presence here. Certainly, we must become prepared for this. The directive of the New Paradigm Institute is to let people know so they can prepare, become understanding of this new world that is about to emerge. Please welcome the very startling and intelligent Mr. Danny Sheehan.
Thank you very much for coming over. I know there's a lot of other things going on right now. I think this might be put over here. Okay. All right. Today as we gather here this weekend, it's the Super Bowl weekend, and everybody else is getting ready for the Super Bowl, bringing potato chips and beer and get to their homes, and those that are down in New Orleans engage in kind of every conceivable hedonistic activity that we take out down in New Orleans. This kind of weird national celebration we have every year around this. But at the same time, we're here in just the very first month of the second term of President Donald Trump. We have tens of thousands of people being rounded up to be deported. We have things being made that we're going to go and have us physically occupy the Gaza Strip, which has been basically bombarded into nothingness, except for all the people that are there that survive. And we have a war in the Ukraine where there's the present threat of potential further nuclear war hanging over us still until that is resolved. But at the same time that all this is going on, there's all this news in the headlines all around about, as I already mentioned, that these drones, hundreds of drones appearing all across North America and across Europe, England especially. And people are all asking questions about them. In both the Biden administration and now the Trump administration, I simply say, don't worry about anything. It's all sort of under control. The most recent statement they made is that the FAA has authorized all of these drone flights, and yet a sort of substantial number of these drones, so-called drones, are doing these very extraordinary things. They're accelerating from a dead stop to tens of thousands of miles an hour instantaneously. They're turning 90-degree angles at thousands of miles an hour. They're appearing and disappearing, and they're displaying the qualities and characteristics, 5 indicia of UFOs that has been identified by Luis Elizondo, who it's now most of you know is the was the 10-year director of the top secret program inside the United States Pentagon, investigating the UFO phenomenon. And as you probably know, I'm legal counsel for Luis Elizondo. I was going to work with him to craft his complaint, filed with the Inspector General of the Defense Department, challenging not only the lies that were being told about him, indicating that the Pentagon didn't know who he was, had never heard of him. This is after he and Chris Mellon being the former Deputy Assistant Director of for Intelligence for the entire Defense Department, under both the Clinton administration and the W. Bush administration, a code in December of 2017 and provided a front page major news story in the New York Times revealing the fact that there was this ultra secret program going on inside the Pentagon called the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. And was headed up. And this began to state major stories. All of a sudden, the people said, wait a second, is this meaning that the Defense Department is now acknowledged that UFOs are real, that they're not just swamp gas, or mistaken identity for flying birds, and that this set of events around the New York Times article in December of 2017 ended up generating a 60 minutes program where Luis Elizondo was interviewed along with Chris Allen and other pilots that had seen these. They had taken the famous F-18 Super Hornet gun camera videos of the Tic Tac. All of this news is kind of flooding in. David Grush, who was on the UFO task force, testified to Congress in July of 2023, declaring under oath that our United States government was in possession of one or more non-human origin extraterrestrial spacecraft. And in fact, we were in possession of one or more bodies of the occupants of these UFO craft, and that they had been tested and determined to be non-human. And Luis Elizondo himself appeared this past November in front of the House Oversight Committee, the House of Representatives, and under oath confirmed that. But when he was asked by Congressman Burleson from Arkansas, a member of the House Oversight Committee, and he said, Mr. Elizondo, if you and I could get alone into a skiff, one of these private, completely airtight air rooms that can't be electronically monitored, and since you and I both have the adequate clearances, would you be able to provide to me the absolute proof that would convince me as a skeptic that we are in fact in possession of a non-human origin extraterrestrial spacecraft and the bodies of non-human occupants? And Luke said on oath that I would be authorized to do that. It would have to be somebody higher up than me, which means that they are not allowed to tell Congress about this information. This presents a serious constitutional challenge to have members of the executive branch and the military and the intelligence community refusing to share information with Congress about the existence of an extraterrestrial civilization surrounding us. And more recently, Ross Coulthard, an investigative journalist from Australia who has a program on News Nation, has been interviewing people who assert, again under oath, and willing to take lie detectors, that they are actually personally involved in the active physical recovery of UFO craft from an extraterrestrial source, and that they've recovered the bodies. And more recently, one of these people is Jake Barber, who was a U.S. Air Force Special Forces person who has testified under oath to recovering one of these vehicles, and has asserted that when he was hauling at the end of a 150-foot rope this vehicle, that he was overwhelmed with a realization that there was another consciousness that was in the craft, and that the consciousness was reaching out to him and contacting him. And he had this overwhelming experience of love and being embraced and upheld by this genuinely feminine energy. And he actually, this special forces guy, started cheering up and crying over the experience, this astonishing experience of consciousness that was occurring to him. And so that now President Trump has announced that he is planning to release all of the information about the UFO phenomenon. So here we are in a month almost in, and he hasn't done it yet. I was very surprised that he didn't keep his word because he's so reliable. But we're still waiting. But it turns out that there's this sense, totally legitimate, that there's this kind of weird era that we're in of the outflowing of information about the UFO phenomenon, specifically connecting it to an extraterrestrial or even potentially extra-dimensional non-human consciousness. And this is all flowing in, and everybody is quite excited about this whole event. But it turns out that unbeknownst to people, that actually 15 years ago, in November of 2009, the Pope of the Catholic Church, at that time Benedict XVI, no real progressive, this guy. He used to be the head of the Catholic Church, the office of the Doctrine of the Faith, and was the sort of the hammer of the heretics. That was where Benedict came from. Karl Ratzinger was his name. But he, in the waning years of his papacy, felt kind of confronted by the ultimate questions of life after death and life in general, what consciousness is all about. He actually used his authority as the Pope of the Roman Catholic Church to convene in Rome at Castel Gandolfo, which is the base for the Papal Observatory. He brought together dozens and dozens of international astrobiologists, astrophysicists, biologists, and others. And they discussed for a full week at Castel Gandolfo the probabilities of life existing elsewhere in the universe. And on November 10th of 2009, at the direction of Pope Benedict XVI, Father Jose Gabriel Funes, who was the director of the Pontifical Observatory, went to the Vatican press room, the official Vatican press room in Rome at the Vatican, and made an official announcement on behalf of the Catholic Church, in which they said, in light of the discovery of more and more of these new exoplanets, now that the UFO, or the space platforms have been put up there, including the James Webb telescope now, but the Hubble had been earlier, the Max Planck telescope, with each new generation of space telescopes that's been put up, they're discovering that more and more stars exist actually in our Milky Way galaxy that have never been suspected before. There had been a suspicion that it was 100 billion stars in our galaxy before they put up the Hubble. Then they realized that since they could see farther out, that there were actually at least 200 billion. Then the Max Planck observatory was put up. They realized that there were 300 billion. And now they realize that with the James Webb telescope, they're looking at something like 500 billion stars just in our Milky Way galaxy. And very surprisingly, that virtually every single one of them has orbiting around them planets, and in the plural. And that at least 20% of them that they've been able to determine now have planets in what they call the Goldilocks zone, which means that it's not too hot and not too cold, just like the porridge in the Goldilocks. And so therefore they're close enough to their sun to have enough warmth, but not too close to get burnt, to be able to have liquid water on the planet. And they realized that liquid water, in their scientific estimate, had played a major pivotal role in the generation of life on our planet here on Earth. So now we're confronted by this reality, and the Catholic Church convened this meeting and made that statement, saying now in light of the discovery of more and more of these new exoplanets, it has now become clear that much sooner than had been previously anticipated, we are going to discover life elsewhere in the universe. And therefore, the time has arrived to have an extremely important conversation about the profound philosophical and theological questions that are going to be posed to our human family by the discovery of life elsewhere in the universe. Now, when I heard that statement issued, I, exercising my previous incarnation as general counsel at the United States Jesuit headquarters in Washington, D.C., in their social ministry office, that was in charge of working on public policy for the Jesuit order, which is the largest single order in the Roman Catholic Church in the Western civilization. And I reached out and contacted Father Jose Gabriel Cruz, who was a Jesuit, and went to see him, sat down, and within 2 minutes of our face-to-face conversation, he said to me, he said, look, Dan, he said, look, we're not talking here about the discovery of some single-cell life form beneath some frozen sea on some distant moon in some far-off galaxy. That we're talking about another highly intelligent and highly technologically developed, but distinctly non-human species right here in our Milky Way galaxy. So it struck me that the time had arrived for us to start having this serious discussion of the profound philosophical and theological questions that would be posed to our human family in the event that we actually discover life elsewhere. But in light of what I have come to know about this fact of the recovery of several, at least, UFOs of a non-human origin, and the recovery of the bodies of the occupants that are non-human species that are obviously highly technologically developed with these craft. And that I realized that the time has already arrived for us to have this profound discussion of the profound philosophical and theological questions posed to our human family. So the question is, what are these profound philosophical and theological questions that are now actually being posed to us, which, as you can tell, are not being answered by any of the major authorities that people look to. The religious authorities aren't answering these yet. The secular authorities aren't answering them yet. The universities, academic community are not answering these questions yet. So the question is, how do we as lay people, not trained in any one of these major fields of philosophy or theology, how do we go about ascertaining what these profound philosophical and theological questions are, so that we can begin to have this all-important conversation among ourselves as to what the questions are, but what the answers might be to these things. Now, right off the bat, I think it occurs to us that the kind of questions that we would be asking ourselves depend a lot on, for example, one set of questions are posed if in fact we discover life, a single cell life form on some far distant planet in some frozen sea, and just all of a sudden it's confirmed that life itself exists in some far off distant place where we can't even get there. It's a different set of philosophical and theological questions. If we discover that a more complex life form has been discovered, even in some far off place where we aren't able to physically get there as human beings. And a whole other set of questions are confronting us. If in fact we discover that it's a highly complex life form that actually has attained intelligence. And yet an additional set of questions that are posed to us if it's a highly intelligent and highly technologically developed, but non-human species. And then there's a whole lot of other questions that occur to us if in fact we discover that they're located in some place where they're close enough to have communication with us, so that we can get a message, a radio message, an electronic message out to them, and then one back from them, even within a single lifetime, or even within 200 years. This is that question that you may have seen, the three-body problem, which was a major production that was on cable television. When our human family was confronted with the reality of an extraterrestrial intelligent civilization, even though it would take them 400 years to get here, it began to generate turmoil and confusion on the part of the human family, at least in that particular story. But what about if we discover that they are in fact close enough to us, this life form, where they can reach here? What if we discover that they not only can reach here, but they are reaching here, and that they have been reaching here for some time? And what if we discover that they've been reaching here for 5,000 years? What are the profound philosophical and theological questions that are posed to us by such a discovery? And so that we have to now ask ourselves, you know, what exactly what is the difference between the philosophical questions and the theological questions? Because most people hear these terms tossed around, but we don't really focus on it, exactly what the difference is there. But the difference between the philosophical questions and the theological questions is that the philosophical questions are in fact questions that have to do with the physical material reality inside our universe. You know, what is our relationship as a species to these physical activities inside our universe? And that these are secular questions that we can try to address. The theological questions are questions that really have to do with some transcendent realm that isn't governed strictly by the material, standard, scientific, physical world that we talk about. And so that we start out by asking ourselves, you know, and obviously there's a whole set of other profoundly important questions other than just the philosophical and theological questions. There's the questions of the scientific questions. What's the impact going to be on us of discovering that there's an entire different set of rules that govern the realm of physics than we thought? Because here we see these craft that are, you know, descending from 80,000 feet, which is technically outer space, you know, down to the surface of our oceans in 0.7 of 1 second, and stopping immediately, generating some 6,000 pounds of G-forces, 6,000 Gs on us, which would turn any human being inside such a craft into soup, basically. And yet they do this, and then they submerge in the sea, and they travel at over 200 miles an hour under the ocean. Okay? So this poses a whole different set of scientific realities, even within the material plane. And of course, the realization that these beings are coming and going from our planet confront us with a whole series of geopolitical questions of how do we as a whole collective human family come to deal with this extraterrestrial civilization, and given the fact that the United Nations is as weak as it is in its present incarnation, where it can't even stop what's going on in Gaza, it can't stop what's happening in the Ukraine, you know, and so we're supposed to rely upon this type of state of our development of a collective decision-making process on our planet to deal with it. So we have profound geopolitical questions that we're going to have to answer. And of course, there's the economic questions. What's the impact going to be on our economy of finding out that there's a whole set of technology that basically completely overwhelms and negates the fossil fuel industry on our planet, which is at the root of so much production and economic power and stuff on our planet. In fact, the dollar, the American dollar, is rooted in the value of petroleum, the petroleum dollar. You know, so what are the economic implications of the onset and onrush of all of this new technology? And of course, the domestic political question. What are the political implications if we realize that the leadership of both of our major political parties have been lying to us about this for at least the last 80 years, since Roswell or even earlier. The entire 80-year period, they say, of 1945, of the crash at the Trinity site. Okay, so what are the implications for those political parties? And what are the political implications for the elite that actually govern those parties? About the lack of trust on the part of our people for that. How do we adjust this? And of course, there are profound religious implications. Because if the church is, and the churches are coming forward and even begrudgingly saying, oh, we think it's time to have an important discussion about this much earlier than we had anticipated. What does that mean? Does that mean that they've known about this for all this time and they have not been talking to us about it? That they've been making up some kind of cockamamie stories, about people with wings and angels flying around, and in fact it's been this other reality that they've known about. What happens to the confidence in the religious institutions, and what effect does that have on the moral choices that people make? And of course, there's a myriad of public policy questions that need to be answered about how we're going to interact with this extraterrestrial civilization. So there are lots of other categories of profoundly important questions than just the philosophical and theological questions to which reference was made back in 2009 at the Vatican in this major statement. But what we want to do for today is I want to focus on the philosophical and theological questions that we want to come to grips with. That's sort of the kind of more the realm here. This isn't a political gathering as such this weekend. It's sort of a metaphysical and a philosophical and kind of theological gathering that we have here. So as I pointed out, the philosophical questions really relate to all of the implications of the interaction of mass and energy inside our physical cosmos with each other, and what our relationship as human beings and sentient conscious beings to that are all about. The theological questions really, they have to do with the more profound questions of which we'll get to. but what are some of the philosophical questions that are posed to us when they say to us, the time has come to discuss the profound philosophical questions that are posed to us by this encounter with an extraterrestrial civilization, realizing, of course, that we now are not necessarily not only at the geophysical center of the entire universe, which we already went through that debate way back with Copernicus and Galileo, but that the churches had structured a whole reality system that it was dependent upon us being in the geophysical center of the entire universe. That everything in the entire created universe was all for us. It was a great stage on which we would play out the drama of the kind of teleological unfolding of the consciousness of our human species, into the universe. But now, lo and behold, if they're not there, they had to recover. And so what they did is they substituted the model of us being in the geophysical center of the entire universe with us simply being at the apex of the pyramid of all created sentient life in the universe. It was a slight demotion, but otherwise we're trying to maintain our uniqueness in the entire universe. Now, that is one of the most profoundly important issues being challenged. Because if, in fact, we're not even at the apex of all sentient life in the universe, what's our job? You know, I mean, what's our whole purpose? What's our meaning? You know, and so that's one of the primary questions, is the philosophical questions. And, you know, what are these profound philosophical questions that our human family grapples with generally? Like, what is the meaning of life? You know, what is the meaning and purpose of our whole human family? Is there any such purpose? Does there have to be such a purpose? And how does that relate to our own individual lives? If we have some purpose, in life, a calling in life, or is this just something that is there any, if there's no meaning at all in our life, collectively as a species or even as individuals, so what ought we to do in the face of that realization? I mean, some people like to, you know, jump out of a first-story window, plop, you know, and then you have to get back up again and say, well, that didn't work. And so you have to kind of come back to grappling with life. Other people decide, strangely enough, that they're going to commit suicide because all of a sudden there's no meaning whatsoever to their entire existence. Rather a strange response, but it's one that's fairly well known. Or, for example, might we actually engage in the process of creating some artificial meaning in life? This, of course, is the classic undertaking of existentialists. The existentialists actually come up with, they attach themselves to some particular arbitrary, might I say capricious, meaning, and then they pursue it. At least it gives them something to do. It keeps them focused on a particular objective, gives them a sense of meaning, even if it's somewhat artificial. Or might we actually simply resort to attaching ourselves to a dialectic where there's good guys and bad guys in the universe or in the world, and that we're the good guys and we take on the bad guys, and we engage in this kind of weird dialectic that tends to lend important value to us. And this reminds us, of course, of the famous experiments that Margaret Mead did, you know, back in the 1940s. 30s actually, it started, where she was doing anthropological studies in the South Pacific Islands. Everybody might well know about her, you know, coming of age in Samoa, where she, in the Samoan Islands, she was examining their different cultures. But there's also another study that she did that generated a paper. This called "Warfare is Only Our Invention," and what she did is in Papua New Guinea, she found that one of these islands there were these two tribes that were on this island, and they had virtually no contact with the outside world at all. And what she did is she and her team set up cameras way up on a mountain with these big telephoto lenses, and we're watching these tribes. It turns out it became clear that these had at one time been a single tribe that dwelt together all on the plains of this island. And what had happened is they had somehow in the past retreated up into the separate sides of the valley. And one lived in the mountains on one side of the plains, and the other lived on the other one. And what would happen is they observed them over time. Each of the tribes would send hunting parties down onto the flats of the plains, and they would be hunting. And when they encountered each other, they would fight. The two hunting parties would fight, and they would fight only until one person had been killed. And as soon as one person was killed, they would both retreat. And the tribe that had their person killed would engage in this lamenting thing, throwing ashes on themselves and crying and moaning and whining and pining away. The other tribe that had won, that had killed the other one, would have this huge celebration. They would drink inebriating liquids. They would have orgies, and they would have these huge celebrations. And they watched this happen, and then she discovered that they were taking turns. Just taking turns doing this. And she wrote this article about it. It was very controversial, that warfare is just our own invention. But it gave each of the tribes a sense of being, purpose, and achievement, and high intense emotional experience. So is this what we do? Or might we instead just kind of descend into hedonism, assuming that there's no discernible, secularly determinable purpose in life? just, let's keep things in generic. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Until you get older, then you have to figure out some other things. Or you could actually descend into seeking material wealth and power. It's the old standby. If you don't have anything better to do, then try to be rich and powerful. That was the famous statement when McKinley was elected. What was the fellow's name? Mark Hanna was his major political advisor. And when he was asked one time, what can a young American really expect to achieve in their lives? He said, the best thing you can do is make as much money as you possibly can before you die. And he actually said that. And that was the kind of preeminent credo of the robber baron era. Okay? And so that these are various responses that we might have to a world in which we can't discern any definitive meaning for our existence. Okay? This is one of the most profound philosophical challenges to our human family. So what might be the referent for some meaningful ground of meaning in a purely secular form? This has been dealt with by the philosophical community, and this is one that I ran into myself when I was out practicing law. The bottom line is that I ended up going back after having graduated from college and law school, and then I went to have a conversation with Dr. John Rawls, who was the chairman of the Department of Philosophy at Harvard University. And he recommended that I come back to the university for a third time and do a PhD in comparative ethics, differing worldviews. And what Dr. Ralph Potter, who was the professor of comparative social ethics at Harvard University, he set forth the method by means of which, in a purely secular, materialist world, how you seek out and find the ground of moral meaning. And what he probed into the question of whether there exists any ground of meaning in the purely secular, materialist world. And what he discovered is, and he articulated that, is that what a person would seek in the strictly philosophical realm, having to do with our relationship to the physical material world that we find ourselves in, is that we would, in fact, try to comport every single action that we took as an individual person to comport with what it is that we understood physical reality to be. Seems perfectly objectively logical that under any particular circumstance you try to do whatever it is that enables you to cope with the physical reality. And so, for example, if you're building sandcastles on the beach and you think that that's important to have a sandcastle there, and you go away and you come back the next morning and it's washed away, and you build another sandcastle and you go away and you come back and the thing is washed away again, you start to say to yourself, something's going on here that's interfering with my sandcastle. And so what you would try to do is try to understand what was going on physically. And so that if you can figure out objectively what's going on physically in the secular world and comport every single action you take in accordance with that, that this would be an ultimate reference for coordinating your meaning in an otherwise entirely secular world. But what he discovered, however, that Calcott Parsons, who was the head of the Department of Sociology at Harvard University, had undertaken a major set of studies about all of this. And what Calcott Parsons discovered was that when our human family is confronted collectively by any particular challenge or public policy problem, what we tend to do is divide ourselves into camps of differing worldviews. And that he started out by identifying them along a political spectrum. And on the extreme right, he referred to a certain set of people as right systematists. And at the other end of the political spectrum were left systematists. And then there were right marginalists and left marginalists and middle marginalists, he called it. That was it. But in what we were assigned to do in the master's program at Harvard in the field of social ethics, we were required to pick one of the major public policy issues. You could pick whichever one you wanted. Do you support abortion? Do you support first-strike nuclear weapons? Do you support the death penalty? Do you support gay marriage? There's a whole series of public policy issues that our human family is confronted by. We would pick one of these, and then what our job was to do was to figure out all the proponents that are arguing one position or another in response to these public policy challenges, that we would put them in these camps. And what Ralph Potter, the chair of the Department of Social Ethics, pointed out is that what really distinguishes, and this is just the heart of what I want to communicate with this morning on this point, and that is that what they discovered is that what differentiates a person attaching herself or himself or theirself to one or another of these different worldviews was the answers that that person provided to four fundamental, profound, physical facts pertaining to the universe. And I just want to share these with you quickly. And what he discovered, he created this thing called Potter's box, this big four square. And that there was one of each of these four fundamental, profound pillar questions about physical reality. The first one is the cosmological question, and that is, how did our physical universe, how do you believe our physical universe came into material being? Why is there a physical universe rather than there not being one? How did that happen? The second issue is the teleological question, and that is, how is our physical universe unfolding? Is it engaged in some sort of a process? Is it expanding and disintegrating and is ultimately going to expand into nothingness and fade away? Or is it in fact going to collapse back in upon itself and repeat this process? That this is the teleological question. And how do you relate to that? What does that mean to you if that's going on, one or the other? Thirdly, the question is the big one for this context is called the ontological question. And that is, how did consciousness arise in the universe? How does consciousness come out of, supposedly, unconscious atoms of hydrogen or oxygen or carbon or what else? How do they come together to actually generate a life, something that's alive, that apparently has some sort of a self-contained consciousness that can then impart direction to this collective of the massive energy? How does consciousness arise? And what role, if any, does consciousness play in the kind of unfolding of evolution? This is what they call the ontological question, one of the fundamental root questions of philosophy. The fourth and final of these four pillar views is what they call the epistemological question, and that is, what means do we have at our disposal as human beings, as Homo sapiens, by means of which we can possibly answer questions like that? Are we limited to our five senses of hearing and seeing and tasting and touching and smelling? And even if we magnify those with artificial equipment, is this the only means we have for being able to discern reality? Or in fact, is there some other faculty that we have that raises the question of extrasensory perception? The whole question of telepathic communication, remote viewing, non-local knowing. That this is a fundamental, profound epistemological question. These are the four profound bedrock pillar questions about the nature of physical reality and its origins and its process that it's engaged in, that we find ourselves in. And the bottom line is that if in fact a given person answers each of these three other questions in a way that is completely internally and self-referentially consistent with the answers that it provides to any one of them, that this in fact then generates a completely internally self-referentially consistent worldview. And that principle that they all share in common will generate a principle which, if you apply that principle to every single choice that you have to make in your life, is a philosophy. I mean, people don't even understand where they come from. Oh, you have to read to see if someone's written it all out. Or what did Nietzsche say? You know, or what did Heidegger say? You know, or what, you know, is that how you find out about what philosophy is? No. Philosophy is that operative principle applied consistently and systematically to the answer to all the individual choices that you have to make in your life, which is rooted in the same principle that is generated by coming to answers to these four questions that are actually internally and self-referentially consistent with each other. Now, the fact of the matter is that not many people do that. Not many people think about that. And not many people come to a self-conscious conclusion about, or an operative conclusion as to the answer to each of those questions, and be able to discern the human principle and then apply it in their life. And that's why most people are so unhappy. That basically people don't know what they're doing. And they don't know how to relate to the external reality that seems to be kind of victimizing them, and buffeting them around, and they can't figure out what's going on. But those who do come to clear and concise answers to those four specific questions, and do so in such a way that they're all internally and self-referentially consistent with each other, they are advocates of a worldview. And that's why if you get in the room with an advocate of one of these worldviews, you're going to get taken. You know, you're going to get brought into whatever their worldview is, because you don't know what you're doing. And they do, at least they appear to, right? And they're very confident, they're completely certain about what they're doing, and they always have an answer for the next question, because it flows from their worldview. Okay? And so what these worldviews are, in doing the master's work that I was doing before undertaking the PhD, that I came to the conclusion that there were two additional worldviews in here, which are left and right middle margins. So that there's actually a spectrum of these seven that are worldviews, and they range so that you'll make notes of these. I'll see you taking out your pencils here. They range from right to left to be authoritarian, reactionary, conservative, moderate, liberal, progressive, and utopian. Okay? And these are the worldviews. But what we hear most of the time is the argument about the liberals versus the conservatives, or the conservatives versus the liberals, from your point of view. And so and because the reason for that is because the people that are articulating and framing these debates are adherents to the second paradigm worldview, which is a dialectical worldview. And that they believe that the means by which you derive any kind of sense of value is by being able to identify an ultimate other. And that the ultimate other that you are in dialectical conflict with, and that you derive your meaning and your sense of self-value by being able to overcome them. If you have any question about the thoroughgoingness of that particular worldview in our culture, take a look at the game tomorrow. You know, just tune in. You know, turn it on at like 3:30 tomorrow and watch the red team from Kansas, you know, have a confrontation with the green team and watch them. They've got a ball that they put in the middle of the field and they chase it up and down. And they whack each other, they knock each other down, and they cheer and they jump up and beat their chest. You know, and they do dances and stuff, and watch it happen. And what you see is that we are in a culture here in the United States that is profoundly attached to the second paradigm worldview. And that therefore, we want to be first. We want to be the best. We want to be superior to the ultimate other. And the ultimate other may change from what month to month and from year to year out of George Orwell's 1984. It's the Islamic fundamentalists, or it's the Russians, or it's the Chinese, or else it's, the Palestinians, or the Israelis, depending on which team you're on. And so that what we have is this pervasive attachment to a second paradigm worldview. And what you'll discover if you probe deeply into this, you'll discover that the qualities and characteristics, the charisms, as it were, of those who are adherents to the second paradigm worldview has to do with a certain disorder in your second chakra. Just take a look at what the charisms are that attach to these energy centers in the human body, in the biological vehicle that we occupy. And that if you're out in your second chakra, you have this kind of fetish of being attached to identifying an ultimate other, engaging in this kind of dialectical conflict with them. And that those who can rise above that, and they rise up into their heart chakra, for example, have a much different response. And they will come here for the weekend. Knocking down beers and high-fiving each other in their living room, in front of a 75-inch plasma television, okay, which they can change with flickers, and charge, $9 million a minute for commercials during the thing. Okay, so now what I'm saying is that there are various responses that one might have in the strictly secular realm, by means of which you ascertain meaning or value in life. But the problem is that what we discover is that even coming to the insight that Dr. Rolf Potter did and Talcott Parsons did at Harvard University, that view themselves as kind of the seat of the liberal ethic in Western civilization, trying to impart this to their students so that they can go out and run the world. That even that doesn't solve their problem because it doesn't resolve these conflicts that cause problems, because you got now 7 different groupings going up against each other, at one time or another. So the bottom line is the question that arises is there some other means by which you can discern meaning in reality and in life, etc. And the bottom line is this is the realm of theology. This is the realm of trying to come to some kind of judgments about, for example, what was going on before the material universe came into being. How did it come into being? Is the answer to that cosmological question. Okay, and if so, is there some sort of infinite and eternal sea of undifferentiated consciousness? It just abides out beyond the physical limitations of the sum total of mass and energy that make up our material universe. And did that infinite and eternal sea of undifferentiated consciousness, or at least therefore, the consciousness that was completely undifferentiated, if in fact it generated an initial unit or nodal point of differentiation, why did it do that? And was that nodal point of differentiation, was it in fact completely programmed to be able to generate all of the things that are going to happen in the entire universe? Was that in that initial instant of differentiation preordained or preconditioned? Or in fact, did it entail potential free will of some sort of whatever the entities were that were going to be coming into being? These are profound and theological questions that we have, and what we've discovered is that what's happened is that whatever insight our human family has had over the multitudes of centuries, that what happens is that any individuals who happen to rise to a level of consciousness where they have an experience of this overwhelming unistic experience of being and are flooded with a sense of unity and love for them and their neighbor, What happens is our human family around them, who don't have this experience, what they do is they form institutions all around them. And they build up the institutions and they start making rules and regulations and then they try to enforce them to see whether you're going to be in our team versus another team. Whether it's the Christians versus the non-Christians or the Jews versus the other people. The East versus the West, the Christians versus the Eastern religions, etc. But the fact is that people who are seeking a source of meaning outside of simply adopting one of these worldviews. The problem with the strictly secular approach to this is that nobody, no human being, has a definitive answer to any one of those four questions. No matter what you think. If you attach yourself to one of the worldviews and you pick an answer to those questions that are internally self-referentially consistent, somebody else picks another set, even if theirs is internally self-referentially consistent too, is different than yours, because you get a different worldview. So that doesn't solve the problem. And so the people seek this other realm, this theological realm of trying to determine